Live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight from the great Midwest, the millennial man himself. Wait, you're the Midwestern man because you're 30 something, RDV. And RDV, I got to say, from the Midwest, what comes to mind is the word wholesome. When I think wholesome, I think dogs. And when I think dogs, I think of a shirtless Channing Tatum running around in a pool of his own spittle as he's having a seizure while his dog sits there and whine. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're talking about the Channing Tatum recent release here in 2022 of Dog, a movie about an Army Ranger that has PTSD that has to take a dog from point A to point B. And it's kind of actually an adult, more serious, non Christian version of the buddy dog Bond film that we don't get too many of them unless they're pretty kid-like or religious. And I gotta say, RDV, for my initial thoughts, this movie is a little bit better than I thought it was going to be. I'm not gonna say it's fun, but it has a lot of adult themes in there, very light humor, enough where they don't go too deep. But it does, I think, a pretty good job of representing what actually happens in life with a lot of situations without really making a judgment about certain types of people one way or the other. And we'll get into that as we talk about some of the scenes that come up. But what's your initial take on this film?
Going into it, I kind of figured like, wow, this is an easy A to B plot. You know, we've seen this before, so I was like, oh, okay, well, let's see how it goes because it's usually the kid stuff, and then this was a little bit more adult, and you throw Channing Tatum in there, you know, obviously you're gonna get shirtless Channing Tatum, you know, and it was, like I said, it felt kind of like a little bit of a comedy slash adult situation because he's gotta get the dog. His one of it, he's basically you see him, he's got PTSD, but he's also suffers from concussion and seizure, so he's on medicine because he's got brain damage. He doesn't want to admit it, but he's trying to get back into a job because that's all he knows. He hates, you know, working. You know, he's working at a sub place, and he doesn't want to do that. He it's basically he feels out of character, out of place. So he's trying to do what he can. So he's basically after one of his former squad members dies, you know, he basically makes a deal with the captain and says like, hey, if you can get this dog from here to Arizona, it's like, you know, I'll put a good word in for you, but you got to do this within 6 days or something like that. So
yeah, it has that built-in time constraint, like a bomb going off. So he's got to do it, but he has plenty of it. So you know there's going to be some hijinks along the way, some shenanigans and stuff too. But the point you mentioned about being adult-like is absolutely true because you know he is suffering from more than one thing. And while he's a hunky, sexy guy, and a lot of men and women and all people in between like Channing Tatum, he's not had a very good run in the past 5 to 10 years as far as movies. I believe he personally may have gotten divorced. I don't really follow that stuff too much, but my understanding was he was trying to reboot himself in terms of acting, that he took a step back because some of his dream jobs, I think there was Jupiter Ascending and something else, didn't do too well. And I don't know the specifics. So for him to turn around and kind of pivot onto this and keep it kind of mature, I think was a bit of a surprise for me too. As far as the movie goes, we've talked about how a lot of times in movies we get a simple plot, we know what it's about, and it's okay as long as it's done well. And I would have to say that starting off, it's a simple concept, but the dog I want to talk about because it's front and center. And if the dog doesn't work, it doesn't matter how good Channing Tatum is, it's going to be a tough film. So we don't have a Labradoodle, a toy breed, a little 5-pound one that you carry in your purse. We have a Belgian Malinois, or however you pronounce it, basically, a slick German Shepherd, or even cyborg version of it. And these dogs are smart, they're aggressive, and the one that he's supposed to transport also has PTSD. So we're going to obviously find out that they're going to need each other at the end, and you can see this coming from miles away. But what I liked about this in terms of an adult nature is this is a dog that could just shred you, and we see that this isn't a dog that is very lovey-dovey through most of the film. And I think it's kind of challenging because you don't get to see anybody deal with something like that on screen, let alone with a dog that is very dangerous. It's not something you'd have your child work with unless it had some serious training. So what was your take on the dog as a character?
The dog, when you first get it, it's like Turner and Hooch. He's paired up with his dog, and this dog is just like not what he wants at all, because this dog, or actually, you know what? I took it a Hooch. It's more like Canine, the Jim Belushi one. Yeah, because the dog is it's got a muzzle on. It's aggressive, and they're telling him like that the dog will attack you. It's like So there's even a joke about that, like don't touch your behind the ears because it drives her nuts, and he ends up being attacked. But he keeps it until you have to get the muzzle on only for 2 hours because it gets too hot. They need to breathe. So he's got the dog in the back of this like was it a 1984 what was it?
Was it a Ranger or some sort of
Yeah,
pickup? Yeah.
got Ford Rangers and that. And yeah, so he's got to drive it in the back. This dog, he basically he's like he's not getting along with the dog. The dog, he's losing energy. First thing he does, he stops at a gun range. This is where it shows. This is where a classic Channing Tatum movie, like 21 Jump Street. Not that bright.
Meathead.
Yeah, Meathead. Sitting there shooting. The dog can hear the gunshots. The dog is kind of getting irritated. It's whining. It's like it's not happy. It's scared. Yeah. So the dog eventually busts the whole kennel apart, and just chews apart his seat in his car. So and him, he basically goes in this. And this is where he gets this is where PETA might not like this. He goes to the store, he goes inside, gets some Benadryl, puts it inside like a hot dog, and throws it in. He's like, "Yep, night, bitch." The dog eats it. And the dog's kind of like woos out. He's like, and he's basically harasses the dog. And he's like, "Oh," so it's like he basically makes fun of the dog. The dog's laying in the back. He's like, "Oh, you want me to stop?" It's like, "Oh, okay, I'll stop." He stops it, and he's trying to get laid as he's going through these, and he finds out that the women in here, they're very anti-soldier. They're very liberal. A lot of them are weirdos. And so he has to try and lie his way and pretend to appeal to their nature, but none of them want it. Until he finally goes back to the dog in the car, and it's funny. They got these two girls. He's like, "Oh yeah," it's like they get the dogs too, and they're like, so they go inside and he thinks he's gonna hook up with them. Of course, the dog doesn't want to let him do that either. So there's some comedy in here. And it's in this real world stuff, because they're the women they show their personalities. I've seen women like that before. I've met women like that before. So it's nothing like they're making it up. They really keep it kind of realistic, because he's on the West Coast, and this isn't a dig against women, in general or any of that stuff. But it's just like he realizes as he goes further in the story that none of that matters. As the bond with the dog, his friend's dog, starts to grow a little bit.
Yeah.
But the real comedy doesn't come until he gets to that the hotel.
Well, let's pause for a moment there while I catch up, because I think what you mentioned there about the women is really important, because it's not a very long scene, and it's some lighthearted humor and everything. So it's not like we're laughing because the dog's going to get loose. What they do is this movie does present a lot of different people in their natural environment. So whether you like them or not, we get drug dealers, hippie farmers, we get these women who are tantric believers, if you will. And so that's, you think automatically, oh, that's sex stuff. He's going to hook up, and he does too. And it turns out not to work out that way. All the women that in the bar that he's at, even though it's a happening beer place or whatever, they don't like you say, they don't really seem to like soldiers, and he keeps trying different tactics out, and none of them seem to work. And it's like, how can you turn Channing Tatum down if he's buying you drinks in a bar? It's amazing. But all these women just are happy to get a drink bought for him, and it's really kind of a biting commentary on how things like this go, where he's almost out of place. And his buddy who passed away in the war, they were all a part of a special group, so they have a bond, and he knows the dog. Yeah, but he doesn't really consider himself a dog guy. He's just doing a solid because he wants to get him. And there's actually what I think some adult themes when he meets together with his people about the funeral, and he meets his former captain who, there's an exchange of some dialogue where he mentions about, hey, there's a lot of drunk people here and people that've got bad things, and you signed off on them. Why won't do it for me though, or whatever? And it's because they're all people that've got promoted and he hasn't. So even though he's a ranger and he spilled blood with people and killed people together, and they have this life bond, there's still the politics of when you come back to the States of dealing with the people that were your boss. And you can see where he's a little bitter about it. And actually, I'll touch on this real quick and then I'll fast forward, is that the opening scene where you see he's got a dead-end job working at a sub shop, and the guy's like, yeah, I'd like lettuce and cucumbers and tomatoes. And he's like, okay, sir, lettuce, cucumbers, and says something else, and he totally gets the order wrong. And the guy's like, hey, I said da da da. And he's like, sorry, sir. And it's like, it's not like he's daydreaming or checking out a hot chick. You're going, hey, he's having issues. You know, we saw him take his medication. This is minor forms of his brain damage seeping in that interferes in his ability to live a productive, normal lifestyle day by day. So it's a great way of doing it without going overboard. And then all these little scenes show things in it. So when the ladies are trying to get down with him and he's starting to get undressed and he's going at their pace, his dog's whining and he goes out because the energy's all bad. And their neighbor feels like, hey, you're treating the dog wrong because you got him locked in, no water or whatever like that. And he's not trying to do anything bad or whatever, but the mood's ruined. Of course, the guy throws a rock at whatever, and the dog gets out and almost mauls the guy. So it's like,
yeah, the guy approaches the vehicle while he just sees the dog. Goes, hey, what's wrong with the dog's whining? He's like,
and it's at night and it's in the mountains, so it's not going to be burning hot. But
and
there are people that will do stuff like that.
And that's the thing, is because they're like, oh, they like, who would do such a rare animal? And then because he tells him, dude, like, do not throw that. He's like, get away from the vehicle, and he throws the brake. Yeah, and the dog jumps out like we knew it was gonna happen, and almost mauls the guy. The dad, he's like, what the heck? I'm gonna sue. Your dog attacked me. I'm like, what do you think was gonna happen? And it's like, ah.
And it's unfortunate because there are situations like that come up that, you know, how do you deal with things that come up? You know, I had something recently in my neighborhood where a dog got loose and somebody tried to corral it, bit the guy on the foot, and the guy's fine. But then he turned around, even though he's trying to be a good Samaritan, is now, you know, suing my neighbor. And it's like, okay, why'd you even bother then? You know, it's just, it's crazy how those things go. And the movie just presents these situations. It doesn't necessarily delve into them, but I think what it does, and I think your point is the whole theme of the movie, where, you know, you realize that no matter who you're dealing with, what these situations are, the bond that you're developing with each other along the way is what's important. Because he doesn't hate the dog, he's putting up with it. But then when he gets to the big city, you know, the other thing here that gets mentioned is that when he's going to drop the dog off because he's considered retrainable, a bad seed, if you will, like a lot of old dogs, and most of them, 90% of them, when you go into a shelter, that's what they are. They're big dogs, or here in the South, at least, they were used as fighting dogs. Nobody wants to adopt them. They're big, they're ugly, they're mean, they get put down. This dog's going to get put down the day after the funeral. So he's like, hey, let's go into town. Let's get a really hot hotel or whatever. And he doesn't have any money, so he plays. This is the comedy thing you had mentioned before. He plays a blind soldier where he's going to get a room because a lady had told him that you know, your dog wants to sleep on a really soft bed or whatever. And this is kind of a cute scene too. To me, this is the most humor of the movie.
Before this, you bring up this. This is Kevin Nash. Because the dog gets loose. The dog jumps out the back window because for whatever reason on the back of his truck he does not have a window on the cab. So coming down. So the dog jumps out and then runs through it. And this is, you know, so he leaves his truck running on the side of the road, runs down the hill, and then he sees there's blood. So he tracks the blood into this little abandoned like garden like a thing and a greenhouse. And then he finds there's weed in there. He's like, oh crap. And he realizes he's in big trouble.
Yeah.
Until so he's looking around the dog. He's like, dog, where are you? He's a dog. He's like, this is where he's not calling it Lulu. He's calling it dog. This is where it gets really weird. It's like, I guess there are people who just don't realize that they're not dog people. They don't know. You don't call it dog, but you know, it has a name by dog. Anyway, and he ends up getting shot with a tranq dart. So he wakes up and he's zip tied, and you find out, you know, you don't never see the guy's face. You just know he's a big dude, and basically wants to know, he's freaking out on who he works for, and you find out that later on he breaks free. He finds out that it's in the house. It's Kevin Nash, and the guy is just like on edibles and stuff, and he's freaking out. So he's not really a bad guy, and you learn more about the dog. You learn more about the journal and stuff that he has in there. And so we get the dogs. The guy's wife is a psychic, or supposedly, and you learn. This is where it also looks more. We learn that she says like, "Oh, I see someone on. You know, do you have a daughter named Sam?" He's like, "This is where it gets weird." So this is how they introduced that he actually has a daughter, and I guess an ex-girlfriend or wife that he hasn't seen in a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
So he starts, so he goes, he decides he's gonna stay at the hotel first, but after that he wants to go basically see his daughter, and then see Lulu's brother, because he finds out that Lulu has a twin, brother dog in Los Angeles. But yeah, so the hotel room, yes, he goes there. He's doing the whole blind thing, gang, and then because and he's gonna go hit on the receptionist downstairs, you know, and of course because he can't leave the dog alone because the dog's gonna tear up the whole entire hotel room he's as sweet as in. So he brings the dog with him. Only problem is this is where the comedy is, because the dog sees a guy walking in a turban, a white turban, like the one white cloth, you know, and it runs and jumps, it runs away from him. He runs after it, basically, you know, and then the dog knocks the guy down, and then people, he basically gets him getting arrested because they find all the cops because he's running. He can see the whole scam.
Yeah.
He's in a lockup, and this is where it's kind of cool because I forgot Bill Burr's in this.
Yes.
This is like one of my favorite scenes. Like the whole Bill Burr scene is the cop, and he's like, and then you find out that Bill Burr's character, like his cop, was an MP. And if you watch the beginning of the movie, when he shows up, he's like, the MP's like, you can't use his expired military license. He's like, well, that's who I am. And he's like, well, you're supposed to destroy this. So he's like, yeah, technically, whatever. So, and then he basically like flips off the MPs. So Bill Burr makes a comment about this, how the MPs, you know, yeah, we didn't get any respect. And he's like, well, he's in the jail cell. He's like, this is a Friday night too, so keep that in mind. So Channing Tatum's lying his ass off just to appease this guy MP, just to get out. You know, he comes clean, tells him how he just wanted to get a nice suite and stuff, and all. And then realizes he's a ranger, and then because of this, and Bill Burr is like, yeah, gives him the finger, basically. That's like, you know, have a good week, have a good weekend, bitch. So, so eventually, he does get out of jail, and he does when he gets his stuff and the dog and stuff. He does, because he goes up to Bill Burr's, goes up to Bill's character, and just is, you know, he's like, yeah. He's like, see you later, bitch. So it gets a little comedy right there, and I mean, did they need that, have that in there? Him getting arrested and stuff and all, but it fit. It was short and it was sweet. It wasn't like really exaggerated.
No, but it shows how, you know, he's got to go through a trial or to bond with his dog more, because the dog people would recognize immediately that, yes, dogs do love laying on the bed. They're not being jerks. It's comfortable, it's cozy, but it also smells like you. And a dog is always about the bond with you, and they're always looking to you as a leader. They're a pack animal, so it's a total different mentality than a cat. And dogs over the years have developed an empathy type wiring in their brain, so that's why their eyes are a little bit bigger, and you just feel like they're staring in your soul if you're really into dogs. Now, some people just have pets and they could give two shits about them. There's a lot of pet people out there like it, but the people that are true dog people understand that. And so when he goes to leave, he does Lulu does exactly what every dog would do, no matter if it's a broken dog mentally or old or whatever. It whines a little bit, it's at the door because it wants to always be with you. It always wants to see you. It always wants to walk in with you. And at one point, he ends up giving the dog a bath, and he realizes he has to use his cooing voice, his high pitched voice, to get him in there. And it's a nice little sweet bonding moment, because it shouldn't be a struggle to get a dog to do what you want. You just have to listen to them and pay attention. And I think that gets lost on a lot of people with dogs, and their frustration is they don't listen, they don't do whatever. Well, no, they don't know English. They're reading your tone of voice and your body language. And once you figure it out, you're good. But every dog's got their unique things here too. And you can tell that this dog's starting to warm up to him a little bit and pay attention to him more. But the thing is the dog does what it's trained to do. He saw somebody in a turban, like you said, ran, knocked him down. Fortunately, the guy wasn't hurt and said, well, hey, okay, you know, after hearing the story, I'm not going to, you know, sue you, but I suggest you get mental health counseling, because the guy was a psychiatrist. So along these ways, you're basically getting the idea that he's halfway suicidal, and it's not like he's walking around full of dread, but you can tell he's drinking a lot. He doesn't have anything to live for, and he's always talking about how Rangers are. I watch what I say here on YouTube, but you know, there's a strong possibility of that self-harm is a reality in the military, and here's a way of putting it on screen that might make it believable without actually going through it because of how miserable you feel. But then, to your point, we're getting into the third act. It's only a 90-minute movie, so it's moving pretty brisk. He
Mm-hmm.
gets to the point where he goes to the funeral, and it's kind of like in a little desert area. He just barely makes it, but of course his car breaks down, and he has a moment when it's raining outside where he's in an abandoned barn watching some crap TV shows with him, bonding with his dog, and that's what every owner is. You whatever it is you do with your dog that's a bond, you just do it, and it can be weird and strange, but that's your thing, and that's what you do. So he's learning all this without realizing how important it is to him, but he had met a close friend along the way that basically is what you would call like the angel, if you will, somebody pointing you in the right direction, because he had a dog with a little girl, and he basically says, oh yeah, Lulu was just like her, but I had to spend a lot of time with her and train her, and he goes, it really helped save me. And the whole idea here,
Yeah, Lulu's
again,
brother.
is why it's being a buddy movie, dog rehabilitation, and also military member rehabilitation, whether it's physical and mental, or in a case like this, maybe a little bit of both, is a positive thing, and it does exist. And out of all the interventions that are out there in the world for any different maladies people may be a part of at some point in their life, the only ones that really work are the ones where you're involved in doing something positive like it. So i- the genius of this movie, and I hesitate to say that word, is that so simple. It just presents these things that allows you as the viewer to make a decision on it. Because at the end, I'll let you tie those ends up. What I like about it here, and like I say, you start seeing these scenes, is that yeah, they're going to end up together. Yeah, they love each other, but the point is they need each other, and they're good for each other, and it just simply works. And you can't force it. You can't simply say it. You have to go through things, and you definitely get a sense that by the end of this movie, that bond is legit and it's real. And he now gets his life back a little bit. And it's not a glamorous lifestyle. It's not going off to war like he was wanting to do at the beginning of the movie, because that's the only thing he knows. He's taking on his responsibilities, and trying to overcome his bad situation, as it were, because nobody likes to talk about what happens to strangers, or people who come home, they seem like a stranger and they have PTSD. It's just not that. It's covered up under a, well, thank you for your service comment, and then people move on. But you and I have talked about this extensively in our Rambo review, about how that was one of the first movies to really deal with what happens to the soldiers when they break and come back home. But the ending's wholesome, it's nice, it's clean, and it's cute.
Yeah.
So why don't you tie that up a little bit?
Yeah. Before he actually gets to the funeral, before that breaks down, he does end up going to see his wife, his ex girlfriend, who basically kind of rejects him. He's down on his luck, and then he goes to see Lulu's brother. Uh, so then that's when he meets a guy, and then his stuff gets stolen out of his truck by a homeless guy, and he learns more about so he learns more about why Lulu is the way she is, and he also learns more about himself as well too. He learns about his friend Rodriguez, Lulu's former owner, the one that who's basically is his funeral he's going to. Learns that he was suicidal, and then and he and this guy tells him basically, hey, it's like you have to realize we all need help. We all have psychical problems, whether you're the God. He's like, I don't care if God or rock or whatever, you need to talk through it. You need to talk this stuff, because Rodriguez basically was on Oxycontin, and taking 3 pills a day, and Channing Tatum's character Briggs, makes a joke about it. It's like, we're all suffering from pain here. He's like, no, this guy, he gave up. Instead of he talked about how Rodriguez talked about joking about driving his car at high speed off the Grand Canyon and killing
Yeah.
himself, but
Yeah.
instead he did it to a car, he ran into a tree. And then that's when you start seeing like Channing Tatum's character actually really understand what's going on here. Why the dog's grieving, it's misses his best friend, and just learns more about himself, because he's got to come to face. He has a problem too, and he can't. It's okay to be retired. There's no reason that we have to stay in there till the end. We have to stay, being a military guy. There's no shame with that. Retiring. So and eventually, yeah, see, he does at the hotel room. He does end up having a seizure. Because the homeless guy stole his drugs, his
Mhm.
he was taken on to prevent his concussion, his disease or brain whatever damage he has, supposed to help subside it. So he's off the medication, so he's going withdrawal, and then, yeah, the dog kind of, you get this scene where the dog actually lays down with him, after
Yeah.
his seizure.
Yeah.
It's really wholesome, because the dog can sense it, things are wrong. But yeah, eventually, yeah, the whole part where they get into the shed part, the rain, his truck breaks down in the rain, they run
Mhm.
there, and there's, yes, ladies, it's where you get to see him with a wet t-shirt. Go ahead, wet t-shirt. No,
I'm not offended by all means. Use it if you got it. Use it. You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Uh, so him and the dog have dog's barking because of thunder. She's freaking out. So then they have a fight. And it's like, and then eventually after they fight, he puts on Grey's Anatomy because he learned more from, like I said, from Kevin Nash's, like, and like his and Kevin Nash's wife, and like in the characters. This is a guide. This is basically read more poem stuff, and he basically puts on Grey's Anatomy, was the dog's favorite thing to watch. So he put it on there, and then he was reading poems that Rodriguez had wrote, and it basically kind of like, he's learned more and more about himself, accepting it's okay to be, uh, the way he is. But he's got to make some changes. So yeah, eventually, yes, because the trucks, he basically, him and the dog huff it to the funeral, which is like out in the desert. Yeah, it was just kind of funny. Then you see him actually carrying the dog, doesn't want to move anymore. He's like, oh crap. So you see him carrying the dog.
Well, that's how you carry a big dog, and that's how
Yeah.
you're trained in the military.
So
And the dog overheats a lot. We know that.
yeah, so that was kind of cool seeing that. And then, yeah, the dog, he goes, lays down at the boots of the funeral and the casket and stuff. And then he's supposed to put the dog down, but he's like, he can't leave the dog there. He has a heart change of moment. I love that. So he goes back, takes the dog, and then, the guy's like, hey, do you want your military, your ID back? He's like, no, he's like, toss it. I don't need it anymore. So
Yeah.
he's finally accepted it. And then you see him, he goes and reconciles with his ex, and you see him, and that's it. And he has a dog now, and that's kind of a nice little happy ending.
Well, the scene that you mentioned there where they're going, it might be the Santa Monica Pier. I'm not really sure, but it's at night, and he finds the homeless guy. And again, you can say what you want about people that are homeless. A lot of military people are homeless. A lot of people are, over the years, over the decades, I should say, have been released from places where they were allegedly getting support, medically speaking. So it's one of those situations where they're not making a judgment on if you're homeless, that it's good or it's bad. It is what it is. And this guy, he might be taking his stuff back that stole from him, might also be a vet himself. And the guy even says, I was in the war, and da da da. And he just wants to get his stuff and get out of there. But what's cool is he's Channing's getting buy-in with Lulu's brother or sibling with this other guy who rehabbed it. And so you're seeing what Channing's going to have to go through and how he's going to have to learn how to work with the dog, because the dogs
Mm-hmm.
need a task. They need something to do. They look for structure. They want to please their owner by having something to do. So sometimes putting a little tiny pack on a dog, or if they carry the mail, or just little goofy things like that, they look forward to
Yep.
doing because it's pleasing. And here Lulu's in her environment, and we see her actually go from being neurotic to being totally in the moment, because they're using her scent tracking ability
Yep.
to go after stuff. That's why she had jumped off the truck, because she had smelled marijuana. And so to me, I thought it was a great scene, because you go, hey, this dog's not screwing around. This is the real deal, getting in there and hunting stuff down and tracking it. It's doing what it needs to do. So in a way, she's helping him out because she's allowing him to handle her to do something. And it's not all the time, but he's doing it in a constructive way. And it's, you're right, it is a wholesome scene. It works well. It just shows that, no matter what you can do, you can work hard at something, you can develop a bond, and it may not always be perfect, but it works. But here's a dog that's not cute, it's not fluffy, it's a gorgeous dog, very smart, but very damaged, very shattered. And anybody that's worked with those kind of dogs or had them, and has had an experience like it, again, when a dog can chew your arm off, it's a lot different than a dog that's 5 or 10 pounds. But yeah, I think for my final thoughts, I would say a lot of what I said at the beginning. It's hard to find a flaw with this movie. It's short, it's to the point. It's not really particularly, I would say, a religious film like some of these dog films can be, like having to do with reincarnation or other things. It's just a good, solid film. It's one that you can take a young child to. It's one
Hmm.
you could watch as a man or a woman, older, younger, any generation. They do a good job of, like I say, introducing a lot of scenarios. So it's not just all military people he comes across. It's a lot of different slices of life, and we get to see that bond generate. And I was surprised because I saw it. Just I'm a sucker for dogs, and I see most dog movies that are out there, whether I mention that or not. And a big dog guy myself, personally, my whole life. I found it very sweet and warming, and we don't really say that too much here on the
Yeah.
Extreme Movie Show with the kind of
No.
things we cover, but we do prefer like wholesome, and it's rare that we get one that's like this that can appeal to everybody, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's what really throws me off because the guy who wrote this, the guy director, and he was also big friend of Channing Tatum. This guy Reed Carolyn. He wrote Magic Mike.
Yep.
Yeah, so totally different movie. 22 Jump Street, Logan Lucky, White House Down. So him
Good
and
stuff.
like yeah, so him and basically what's his name? I have basically have been writing stuff and working together for a while now, since like 2012. Yeah.
Yeah. Big part
So
of
and so
Channing's
it's a
career.
totally different genre movie concept. So, but you can see that he kind of appealed a little bit to like Channing Tatum's like goofy style and his like I said, it's I felt it kind of felt like 22 Jump Street when he was doing the hijinks in the hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, it's just I can't find a fault in this movie. There's nothing in here that I mean, and then there might have been a goof in here, as far as like as far as um realistic stuff. They might have made a scene out, but other than that, no, it's oh yeah, it's a Ford Bronco. That's what it was. Yeah, 1984 Bronco. 1984. Yeah.
Classic. I
Yeah.
mean, and it sounds like, it's an easy thing to say. You can whip out and go, well, this is a movie that appeals to all people of all races, colors, creeds, ages, sex, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
But it is rare to say it. And then when you think that that's the case, you think the movie is going to be very plain, very vanilla, very not so good because it has to be safe. And that's not the case in this movie. And that's what is a plus about it. It can be that kind of a movie. If you got a young kid or whatever, got the guys can go see it without going, oh, it's going to be a dopey romance or anything. Nothing like that at all. It's a solid film. It's a good
Yeah.
flick. I enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend it.
Yep. Check it out. This came out in February. It's only been out for a month. So yeah.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Dog, starring Channing Tatum from 2022. Check it out. Nice little pleasant film there. Nice and wholesome. We'll go back to something disgusting and gory probably next week here. We'll be sure to contrast it versus that. For RDV and for everybody involved here at the Extreme Movie Show, I'd like to say thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. As always, stay extreme.
Good night, kids.